Okay, students, so we're going to continue with another example. This will be an example using constraints. So again, some of the things that we're going to cover in this video is how to start a drawing tools, dimensioning, and geometric constraints. Okay. Now, I wanted to take this time to also remind you of the 4 items on the list to fully define a sketch. So in this case, we have position X, position Y, size, and angle. Okay, so as long as you have that for every single item on your sketch, then that sketch should be fully defined. Okay, now this is going to be our example. So what we're going to do is we're going to first create a sketch that looks something like this. Now it doesn't have to be perfect. Notice how everything is blue, so there's really not much going on. When you first create this sketch, just try to make sure that you have at least some vertical lines, some horizontal lines. Now I did throw in a couple of them that are not specifically horizontal, that way we can actually fix them later on in the example, but just sort of keep that in mind. Okay, so just make sure you start off with a sketch that looks something similar to this, and then eventually we're going to make it look exactly like this, so we can actually use all the dimensions and constraints and things like that to fully define this sketch. And at the end of this example, everyone should have this specific example at the end. Okay, so just sort of keep that in mind. You can pause this video here, replicate this in Fusion right now, and then we'll carry on. Make sure you're using inches as your units, and then let me jump into Fusion. Okay, so this is what Fusion looks like. So what I'm going to do here is I already created that specific sketch or something similar to that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save this example. So I'm going to save this as constraints example 1. Okay, and then we'll start actually replicating it. Okay, now one thing I do want to take a look at is if we take a look at this specific sketch, there's a lot of things going on here to fully define it. Okay, one of the first things that I notice is all of these diagonals are at the same angle and they seem to be following the same line. Okay, so there's your hint. That's one of the constraints that we're going to use to define this. And the same thing's happening for the bottom horizontal lines in the inside here. So they all seem to be following just one line. And then notice that the location of my sketch completely changed from the previous one. So I used to have my origin here. Now my origin is in this bottom left corner. Okay, so take that into account as well. Now it also seems like all of these things, so all of the diagonals seem like they have the same length, and all of these horizontals seem like they have the same length as well. Okay, so we'll try to replicate that, and then we just have a couple of dimensions thrown in there. So this 3 vertical, 4 horizontal, 0.5 horizontal, 0.5 vertical, and then 2.2 vertical. Okay, so we'll sort of try to replicate that as we go. Okay, so in this example, first things first, we can either try to move it or adjust this somehow, but make sure that you're using the correct units. So in this case, my units are inches. And then what I'm going to do here to start off, I'm going to coincide this corner to my origin. Okay, so I just moved it that way. I know for a fact that this is going to be placed correctly. Okay, and then once I'm done here, let's take a look at a couple of these things. So this line should be horizontal, so let's fix that. So I'm going to go into horizontal vertical, and then I'm going to hit that line. And then take a look at these lines as well. So this line, and this line should all sort of be in the same line horizontally, right? So I can either horizontal this and then dimension this, and this, or instead, to try to save a little bit of time, I can just do one collinear. So collinear this line to this line, and then this line to this line. Okay, so now they all seem to be having the same length, or the same line, if you will. Okay, now the length itself, they must be equal. So I can adjust that with the equal constraint. So this line is going to have the same length as this line, and this line is going to have the same length as this line. Okay, now take a look at this angle right here. That seems weird. Okay, that shouldn't be there, so it should be perpendicular. So I'm going to look for the perpendicular constraint and then select this line and this line. Okay, so we have 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. Okay, so that seems better. Now let's take a look at all those diagonals. The diagonals are not making much sense right now either. So they should all be sort of the extension of one single line. Okay, so I'm going to do collinear this to this. Okay, that works. This to this. Okay, that's looking better. And this to this. Okay, now this doesn't make much sense, but we can still fix that. Okay, it seems like we have mostly everything as far as constraints. So let's look at the dimensions that we need. Okay, so we go back to this. We'll see that we have a couple of dimensions. So we have 3, 4, 0.5, 0.5, and 2.2. Okay, so let's try that. 3, 4, 0.5, 0.5, 2.2. Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to type D in my keyboard for dimension, and then let's try that again. There we go. And then this one should be 4, and this one should be 3. Okay, and then this one should be 0.5. And then the length from that line to this line should be 0.5, so that's the height. Okay, and then let's see what else. So these things can still move. All right, we'll try to figure that out in a second. Let's give it a length for this line. So dimension for this line here, that should be 2.2. Okay. But it seems like we're still missing something. So I have all the dimensions. I know exactly what we're missing, but let's take a look at that still. Okay, so if we take a look at this, there's something different from this to my other one. Okay, seems like we have everything down here, all the dimensions, but if you notice, each column is also a specific length. So all the columns should be the same length. Okay, now I don't know what thickness that should be, but they are all equal. Okay, and as you can see that we have that icon right there. Okay, so that's the equal constraint. So this is equal to this is equal to this, and this is equal to this. Okay, and I think that's exactly what we're missing here. So as you can see, we have different thicknesses. So I'll just go to equal, this to this, this to this, and this to this. And as you can see, we now fixed the entire sketch. Okay, so missing one or a couple of constraints or a couple of dimensions might throw everything off. So just sort of be careful what you're looking at. Okay, just sort of keep that in mind. Always look at the small details, and then you should be able to figure these things out. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna stop with this example. Again, there's a lot of things covered in this video. If you're still having some questions, rewind the video, pause it, play, take a look at it multiple times until you understand what you're doing. At this point, the only thing that we're really focusing on is dimensions and constraints. The sketches themselves don't really have to make much sense just yet, but at this point, you have to be really familiar with constraints and dimensions. Okay, so make sure you practice all of these ones. Go home, take a look at something that you have in your room maybe, and try to replicate that as closely as possible in a 2D sketch, and then you'll eventually get the hang of how to do these things pretty quickly and efficiently. Okay, so I'm gonna save this example again, that way I don't lose all this information that I just worked on, and I'm gonna stop the video right here.